So hello everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening in whichever part of the world you are. So today we have a very special webinar. We have a very special guest, Dr. Rodney Jackson. So my name is Rinzin. I'm a conservation biologist, and I'm the founder of the Ukali. Ukali is a community-led initiative that focuses on strengthening community-led snow leopard and landscape conservation in Upper Karnali landscape of Nepal or in Greater Nepal. So today I have the privilege to facilitate the session with Rodney Jackson, who is a long-time mentor of mine. Rodney need no introductions. I think he's a well-known figure in the snow leopard world. Rodney Jackson is the leading snow leopard scientist. We have over 45 years of committing snow leopard conservations globally. Rodney was the founder of Snow Leopard Conservancy. Now he serves as the president of the board of directors. Rodney received Rolex Awards for Enterprise in 1981, and which led to the groundbreaking studies of snow leopard, including the first radio tracking study of the snow leopard in remote Nepal. That was the milestone. That was the milestone study about snow leopard ecology, behavior, and other things. So apart from that, Rodney has been still committing community-based conservations throughout the snow leopard range and mentoring young generations to lead or the steward, promote the stewardship or to lead the way the young generations on snow leopard and other wildlife conservations. So without taking much time and a small note, Rodney has been 5-time finalist of the Indianapolis Prize, which is also considered as the Nobel Prize of Wildlife Conservation. So with all the global recognition, commitment, and leadership, I would like to request Rodney to proceed forward. Before that short notice, I would like everyone to write which part of the world are you joining from. Please drop your locations. I would like to request you to drop your locations in the text box for our reference. Thank you. So with this very brief intro, I will let Rodney continue your presentations and we'll follow up with follow-up questions and discussions. Meanwhile, I would also like to request participants to drop your questions in the text if you have any, and we'll be joining up shortly after Rodney's presentation. Thank you. Rodney, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Rinzin, and thank you, SLN, for organizing this webinar. It was very interesting putting it together because I realized I started in 1976, and there's just been so many things happening that it was a big decision. What should I focus on? So I really want to focus on a couple of things. I want to give you guys a sense of what the early study was like, showing a lot of slides, and then move on to, what I think are some of the issues, especially relating to community-based conservation, and end up with maybe where we go from here. So let me start. So it all started in 1972 when I saw this photograph that George Shala had in Pakistan in a National Geographic article. And I was just absolutely convinced before I went back to Africa, where I was born and where I expected to work, I wanted to go to Nepal and see if I could find snow leopards. So I left and I spent about 4 months there in a very remote part, not where George was, because that was not available, but in the Longu Valley in Mugu district, close to where Rinzin works, actually. And what did I encounter? But local people hunting musk deer, because it was a major source of income for them. And here they use these poison spears to kill the musk deer. This is actually a female and not a male, so it was only worth meat for them. But what they were also after, of course, is snow leopards. And when I got to the village, they presented us with this pelt and wanted us to buy it. I spent some time looking where it had been killed. And of course, up the gorge, it had been killed with these poison spears that you can see on the left here that have an aconitum poison on them. So once they get in the bloodstream, they pretty well will kill that animal within 10 or 15 minutes. In the background there is the actual hunter that killed this. They were selling the pelt for or so. And where was that pelt going? It was going to places like this, Europe, Switzerland. This woman is wearing a fur coat that's maybe 10 snow leopards, and would probably sell on the black market for 50,000. But at that time, very little was known about snow leopards, and it was really Peter Matheson's book that I think brought highlight to the world and attention to this rare, rarely seen cat. I was lucky enough to meet Peter just before the book was published. And he said, well, I can't put much in the book, but I'm really interested in what you think about it, because we never saw snow leopards and we were wondering about the future. And so I did get the last footnote in the book talking about what I found. And really what I found is snow leopards being hunted. They did not have a good future at all. And I realized that instead of photographing them or going back to Africa, I should try to study them. And it took 3 years, almost 3 years, and with help from Dala and with, my doing a lot of research, I submitted a proposal to Rolex Enterprises to do the study, the first telemetry study. And, I expected to get somewhere along there, but out of the, 1,000 or so applications, I never really expected to win. Well, I did, and that led me on to get a team together and to spend the next 4.5 years in Nepal, in the Longo Valley, which is sort of west of Dolpo. These are the team members. There were really Dala, my wife, myself, Gary Alborn, who is no longer with us, but from the US, Karan Saha, and then, of course, the villagers, because without them, we couldn't possibly have done this work. It took us a month to get to the study area the first time because we had to walk from the Indian border, and I realized that was not a viable solution. What I needed was to be able to fly to the nearest short runway, which is in Jumla, about a 12-day walk away. And eventually, with help from the wildlife department, we were able to get the Army plane that could take us. In the corner there on the right-hand side, you can see all our supplies for 6 months. So it was very Spartan. We walked north for about 12 days to the village where we were heading for, that I'd visited, the ones with the musk deer hunting. And we passed tea houses like this. So this would have been in 1981. On the way up, in a winter time, actually, we came across a huge sofa going up the trail. And what that was basically, it was a sofa for the King of Nepal, who was doing some field visits in the area. We were heading to this village of Dolfu, right close to the Tibetan border. I mean, it was like stepping back 200 years because there was not one wheel, not one flashlight in the entire village back in those days. But it was a village of very self-sufficient people. They were very friendly. Despite me having reported the snow leopard hunt to the government on them. They came forward, and again, without their involvement, we would not have gone very far with this research. It was always a big day with the porters, because everything that we had for all those 4 years had to be carried up on the back of porters or yaks, and it was a source of income for people. They were only getting about $15, $20 a day, but we had to carry a backpack full of money to be able to pay them, up to 60 porters and about 10 yaks. The trail in was a really problematic trail, and I knew this from before, but I figured if we put up ropes, we'd get by it. Up over Tyson's Cliff, named after a mountaineer. And then to the valley runs east-west, and we were working on the north side of the river, the Longo River, but camping on the south side because of access. And so the only way we could cross that river when the monsoon came was to put up cable bridges. And here's Gary crossing one. And that way we had access to much of, but not all of, the snow leopard habitat. These pictures show our temporary camps. The top one on the left is our base camp. So we lived in tents for all that time. We had a kitchen and a cave. And we had a couple of supplementary camps up at different elevations. The one lower left is at about 14,000 feet, something like that. And the other one in between the two. And it was really Gary and I that would often be traveling to these camps independently so that we could track the cats, which, as you can imagine, was not going to be easy. I knew that I had a good site for trapping snow leopards because there was ample sign, there was good travel lanes, the corridors that they use along the base of cliffs, along the ledges, just above the stream, the bluffs and so on, and that's where we put traps. We put a trap out on April 2nd, as I recall, and after waiting 3 months to get into the study area because of heavy snows, and the next morning, there we had the snow leopard. I could not have a dart gun because that had been kept in custom, so I had to use a jab stick. And that cat was not a happy cat. And I guess I was a pretty scared about what I had to do. But, once you're there, you got to do it. We would weigh the animals all together. We ended up collaring 5 cats over those 4 years. There were 3 males and 2 females. And out of the whole thing, I think we got only about 800 or 900 locations because it would take all day to get a location. Here I am just ready to release a cat. This is the second one that I caught, a youngish male. And it was always so amazing to see leopards close up, to feel their thick fur. But then we had to track them. And this is the inner gorge where we had our base camp. The base camp's right down by the bottom of the river on the left-hand side there that I'm climbing over this Tyson's Cliff with my antennas and then tracking it. And really the challenge was that we had a lot of bounce in those signals. So it would take us all day sometimes to get a full signal. But in the end, we did end up contacting all of the cats about once every 2 to 3 days. So we had a good sense of where they were. The ranges are small, but the prey base was good. And animals ranged all the way up to, 16,000 feet there. There were blue sheep on these smooth slopes, and that was the center of everything. In the core area, all the cats actually visited that same area, but at different times. So they were never much closer than, about half a kilometer or something like that or more from one another, except in the mating season, obviously. Is that snow leopards are intensive markers, social markers. As you know, they leave scrapes, they scent spray rocks, they defecate in prominent places. And all of this is to leave a message to other snow leopards in the area so they can space themselves. So they don't, especially males, they don't run into one another. That could be quite dangerous. And they would know when a female was in heat, and they would be able to facilitate mating during what is a very short period of the year, only a couple of months. But we did have a challenge. And our challenge was that there was a lot of scent marking on rocks, and it was very pungent. I did attract a few snow leopards because I wanted to get more marking on it. I had some lyophilized urine from a captive female in estrus, and that sure got action. But we had a big problem. Our problem was, how would we know whether another snow leopard had come in and oversprayed that site? And the only thing we could think up is to stick up some yellow crepe paper, the wrapping paper, and if a cat sprayed on it, of course, it would decolor the paper. But we found out that we could smell these rock scents up to almost 40 days after they were made. And they were all visited regularly. Snow leopards, in fact, remarked almost many of the scrapes, like 50% of the scrapes were being remarked repeatedly. we were totally isolated. There was no radio. This is before, any telephones or anything like that. But we did get mail once every 3 months or so. We would send a runner to Jumla. The mail would come to the plane there and come back to us. So that was a big day to see letters, especially for Darla, who actually ended up using these newsletters, these aerograms, to write her book. This is really different, but this is one of my first GPSs that I had in about 1996. I'll tell you a story about it in a while. Anyway, we did set up the first camera traps with help from National Geographic with pressure pads, and we got 3 pictures. National Geographic told us we had to have pictures of snow leopards, that not collared ones, but wild ones, if we were to have an article. And we never imagined we would get a cover article, but we did. It was great because it reached a huge audience, probably 10 million, maybe more. And the study was a seminal one for 20 years. Darla's book is out of print now, but it is available. If anybody would like to get a digital copy, please email SLN and they can let us know, and we can facilitate that for you. On to satellite tracking. That really has made the difference. And I think part of the reason it took a while, ground tracking is so very, very difficult and requires full time in the field. Along comes satellite telemetry, and all you got to do is collar the cat, put a collar on, and go and sit in front of your computer in comfort. And this, unfortunately, is what is happening. Nobody or very few people are staying out there and following that cat. And I have to say, without following the cats on a daily or near daily basis, you can put a map, tick on a map where they go, but it's meaningless, totally meaningless, because you don't know what they're doing. You can identify a kill site maybe, but what's it eating? When's it eating? How long is it staying there? All of these things are just not known. So I really regret that muddy boots are not the way to go. So after that study, from about the late 80s through the 90s, I spent all my time traveling to different snow leopard ranges and doing training workshops, actually training rangers on technique, which at that time, the best technique, this is before camera traps, the best technique was sign transects. And I still think they're very valid. They're valid provided you interpret the data carefully, but it enables people without expensive equipment to go into the field and document at least presence, absence of this species. And that's really valuable to get them involved and committed to protection. I spent a lot of time helping establish national parks, the Mount Everest Park on the Chinese side, parks in Pakistan, and training staff. That, I think, is some of the most satisfying things I've done. There was always a problem of traveling in the field. We walked in the Himalayas. We had to. There's no roads. But in Mongolia, you can get in a Jeep like this and off you can go. However, it is very easy in the days before GPS and phones to get lost. When we got lost with the sign post showing here, don't turn to the left. Well, why not? We were in the Great Gobi National Parks doing the first wildlife survey there. And of course, we ended up traveling along the border and we ended up getting arrested. But this is the survey area we were trying to map. This is the only map we had. And we knew that there were isolated ranges there where snow leopards would spend a lot of time. I realized I'm going a little slow. I went by camels. Back to the issue of snow leopards. This is the real problem. Multiple killing, depredation. What can you do about it? The kids totally understand the problem. And it's little wonder that snow leopards are not liked. So I also spent a bunch of time developing techniques to involve them, because I really believe unless you involve the local people as equal partners in the planning, in the decision-making, your solutions will not be sustainable. And you have to use simple tools for them. Visual tools are great, even drawings in their traditional cultural mode. But we all come up very quickly. The villagers will recognize this immediately, that the best solution to prevent multiple depredation is to have a secure corral like this one, or like this one, where the herder could go home at night and know his animals were safe and not have to sleep on the cold ground. You also need to move and provide income, because livelihoods are very tenuous in this harsh environment. And homestays, I think, were one of the best solutions that we came up with. Actually, it was a Ladakhi village woman that came up with it, not us. But we helped them explore it. And now you can go to Ladakh and other places and you can see snow leopards like this one, photographed with just a cell phone. And the cat was more interested in protecting its kill from the magpies than in people like this. All these photographers, many of them professional, with big cameras. And if they came too close, closer than 50 meters, the cat would retreat up into the rocks and watch. One of my most incredible experiences was giving a presentation to His Holiness the Dalai Lama with Mingma Sherpa, organized by National Geographic, talking about poaching of snow leopards and other cats for their furs. I think the other important event in my post-research life was the GSLIP, the establishment GSLIP, and the many years that it's now run. It hasn't quite reached its goal, but it'll get there. And it's great to see all the countries beginning to collaborate more openly. I was able, when camera traps came, with film cameras actually, to write a manual on camera trapping and do some of those initial studies. That those got translated into Chinese and Russian. And working with Jan Janeka, was able to show that genetics actually could provide really valuable information on snow leopards. In many ways, I think more valuable and more easily to get than camera traps. However, it's a political problem because one cannot export scats, and there are very few labs outside of Russia, China, or India that can do this kind of work, and they're overwhelmed with other issues. Most recently, I've got involved with drones because I think drones are an excellent evolving tool for being able to census or count the wild prey of snow leopards, which is such a challenge, whether it's something like an ibex or a blue sheep that lives in rugged terrain, or argali that live in more rolling open terrain. And it was nice to have the first drone paper on snow leopards be published in Snow Reports this last year. So thank you for that. Publications, I think, are really critical, but we have at SLC all along, and especially with Darla's involvement as the conservation leader, come up with books, local books for school kids that are in local languages, Tibetan, Nepali, and we have even one in Braille that got released in Lhasa before the Chinese really clamped down on everything. So that's an important activity. It's even more important, I think, to involve them in the kids in camera trapping. They can do it. As these pictures show, they learn about snow leopards. They become committed to their protection. They take photographs like this and like this. This is incredible because this was in Lower Mustang. They took a picture of a common leopard in habitat that everybody insisted was only for snow leopard. So here's a case of citizen science really working well, especially at a younger age. Snow Leopard Day, I think, is a critical day, and I hope everybody will support it more and more. I just want to briefly end with the important need for thinking about cultures and how do we involve people that see snow leopards as sacred icons as spiritual beings that really hold the future to the welfare of the environment, and that you have to take care of them. We started Land of the Snow Leopard, LOSL, that has now grown to about 100 members and is active in Mongolia, Kyrgyzstan, and Tajikistan in particular. But I think this is a way to go towards the future. And in Russia, the local people see the snow leopard as their spiritual protector. They set up a small national park. And that's the only park in the area, but it's a critical park. So what will I be doing? I really just love snow leopards. I guess it's the best thing that ever happened to me that I didn't go back to Africa, that I ended up in Asia with cats. This is a captive cat, but they're really important for education. And excuse me, we have a wonderful team now that Dal and I have retired. There's a great team running Snow Leopard Conservancy with Ashley and her team. And I look forward to working with them and working with Rinzin and Serin and all the next generation of conservationists. What will I think about? I'm 81 years old now, and I know that climbing these high peaks at 4, 5, 6,000 meters is probably impossible now. But I will always dream of this day when I was in the Longu. This is our study area. And we followed this cat up over a very high peak and saw it and its cubs. So that was really quite remarkable. So thank you all. That's the pictures. I'm going to stop the share and have some water.
Thank you, Rodney, for these wonderful presentations. It takes us back to the time and gives a goosebump to see those, like keeping ourselves in that time. So it was wonderful. Thank you so much. Before we start with the questionnaire, I have one follow-up questionnaire. If you were given one chance to go back to time, what one thing you think you have missed and you would like to do?
I'm not sure it would be the first study because that was a very difficult thing to do, but I think it would probably be to the first time that I went to Mongolia in 1992. And they were establishing parks, and there was a new generation, and we were at the very forefront of finding out where biodiversity existed.
So from your time, starting with modern boot biology, starting science to radio tracking to satellite tracking to now the UAV drones in wildlife. So like personally, like what, what suggestions or how do you feel yourself, if the science is evolving so fast in this way, and how do you see yourself in between these, the changes or over this time?
Well, I guess what I see is that really we've got to push very hard to, I should say, mentor and to help and to bring funding to the new emerging generation. And the one thing that really has happened, I think, since about 2010, 2012, is a huge number of young people beginning to work on snow leopards and especially on the social science side of it. So anything that we as retirees, as the elders, can do to facilitate their work is what is going to make the difference for snow leopards. And what obviously the challenge they face is how do they place in the minds, in the beliefs, in the values of local people that wildlife deserves an equal place there, given the world that is short of resources, that has climate change, all these challenges. That's the challenge I think the next generation really faces.
Thank you. One more interesting thing is that I think in the snow leopard all, for a long time, every SLIMS, snow leopard information management system is something that we we are all familiar, and that is what we adopt. We used to adopt, and we adopt in snow leopard survey or in new areas. So can you share your brief, like the background or the context and how the SLIM was developed? What inspire you, or how you came up with the idea to develop the sling methodology?
Well, it came back to our original study when we were seeing that snow leopards were interacting with one another. And we had the advantage of telemetry, so we would know when a snow leopard, collared snow leopard, walked through. And we set up a transect that was about 2 kilometers long that followed the main route that the cats would follow in traversing down the valley. And we marked every sign that was ever put in there in the 2 years of the field portion that we did it. And we drew maps of it, and we could tell from the orientation of a scrape or the amount of scent whether it had been revisited and remarked or not. We could tell from our collared cats which ones they remarked and which ones they did not remark. And we very quickly found out that scrapes and rock scents that were fresh, within a few days for scrapes, or a week or two, and scents maybe 2 weeks, 45% would be remarked. If it did not have a good visibility, it was not remarked. So what that told me is you could go in an area and you could look for that sign, and if you see poorly defined sign, you would know that there's not a lot of interaction going on between those cats. If you saw culpous sites with up to 30 or 40 scrapes at them, or in, say, 100 meter of transect, you would know that you've got a very robust core population that are maintaining their spatial relationships.
Thank you. That's wonderful. We have a questions. I'm going to take on questions from Neil Mukherjee. I would like to ask, it's for Rodney. What was your first encounter like with snow leopard? How did you find the snow leopard reacting to your close encounter as you came forwards?
Well, let me say, I think, more scared than the snow leopard. The snow leopard certainly showed its teeth, and it hissed a lot, but it didn't try to attack me. And I realized if that had been a common leopard in the trap, there's no way I would have got off it uninjured, because their cat would have come straight for me. Snow leopards are docile, it's amazing what you can do with them. And there's pictures in Dolpo of people pulling snow leopards by their tail. Admittedly young cats, but nonetheless doing that and not getting attacked. So, I learned from that, I guess, that you still need to treat animals with respect. That was probably the most important thing I learned.
Yeah, we have one more question. I mean, there will be more questions. We have questions from Laila Amini, asking about, wondering if you could briefly talk a bit more about the track collars that you have used, and if you have a model that you would recommend more than others for tracking snow leopards. It's about
yeah. The collars that I used were VHF, very high frequency. So everything was tracked from the ground. What you would do now, of course, is use satellite telemetry. And there are some good, there's many companies out there, but there's one called Vectronics, I think, if I remember correctly, that makes really high quality equipment. You can read about this, there's so many things you got to think about. I think you do a Google search, you find some papers, and you read that, and you educate yourself. If I can tell you, but it's going to take more than a few minutes.
I think that should be fine, for follow-up. And we have questions from Christine. It says, your thought on climate change, while we can't fix the big problem, what can be done on the ground? That is first question. And second question is, if I may, observation on methods that those who live with snow leopards can have economic benefit from presence of snow leopard. Thank you. So about, how can the impact of climate change on the snow leopard, how we can fix on the ground? That is one question that Christine asked. Her second question was about the economic benefit to local communities that live with snow leopard.
Well, I would take the economic benefits first. People need that But we do need to be aware that not all tourism is friendly, environmentally friendly, and it needs to be carefully managed. And we need especially to make sure that the benefits go to the local communities and not to some travel agent overseas or in the capital of that country. And that is definitely a big challenge. But Ladakh would be a great place where the community have really led the way for this sort of thing. Um, on the other matter, let me deflect it a little bit because I am very worried, and I'm worried that everybody wants to do research. And you can keep doing research for the next 10,000 years, but that is not going to make the difference in one way or another. We've got to be much more strategic about it now. We've got to bring local people along, and we've got to deal with their conflicts. And that ought to be the highest priority. So if anybody is going to want to go out and study snow leopards, whether it's for climate change, whatever it is for, I would say what their deliverable has to be is a benefit to the local community that is immediate, that they bring, that they build up the capacity for that community to coexist more harmoniously with wildlife and snow leopards. So my call is for definitely conservation action, please. It's great that more corrals are being built, but we need so much more than that.
more scale conservation. We also have a questions from Dr. Karan Saha, who was also for every Dr. Karan Saha was also part of the expedition that Rodney led in 1981's early 80s. So Dr. Saha says, right now there are so many records and research about sympatry between snow leopard and common leopard. Do you see this as a threat to snow leopard?
I don't know actually. I do see now that leopards have been seen in all sorts of places. There was one in Ladakh in Hemis National Park recently, which is to me just not forest leopard habitat at all because there's very little forest there. So it may be a threat. I don't know, but I think snow leopards are very adept at remaining hidden. And so I have some confidence that the two can coexist to a reasonable degree. And hi, Karen. It's nice to talk to you. And I hope some of those pictures, I couldn't show all of the ones, and including your work on the blue sheep.
So we have a request from civils, like asking about history behind the cover photo on your introduction slide.
Asking about the what?
The story behind the
Oh,
cover
okay. Well,
introduction slide.
That was in about 2003, I think, that I took that and using one of the first camera traps that were available. So it was Trailmaster that was active infrared that had cables that run and animal walked through and broke the beam and took the picture. But they were all film. And so we had a roll of 36 exposures in each of the camera. And what would happen is if the sun got into the sensor, it would trigger it. It would have a whole roll of nothing. Or the vegetation would move. Or we'd have a villager walk through it and we wouldn't get snow leopard. Now it's so changed with digital technology that you can take thousands and thousands of images. The picture in the lower side there with all those people and all those flasks was one of our early village meetings that was in Tibet, China, and it was actually dealing with human-wildlife conflicts. And it was where, working with the Mountain Institute and associates from Nepal and the US, we developed techniques for engaging people that I think really make the huge difference, where the community becomes the leader and, we learn from them rather than we try to tell them what to do.
Thank you. We have questions from Flavia. What do you think remains today as the biggest gaps in snow leopard research on the area you have worked with? And the biggest challenges, is there anything you would like to do if you could start a new PhD research today?
Yeah, if I could. I don't know that I'm qualified to do that, but it's definitely lies more in the social side of life. social science part of it. And it's really looking at, how do you promote behavior change? Is it only a case of providing incentives, or how do you build it into the culture? How do you identify and find local leaders and provide them with realistic aspirations, not something that's funded by Western money or that's not sustainable, but something that comes from within their community, within their values. That's the research I would like to see if it is research. But more than that, the action that leads to that.
We have a very interesting questions. I was about to ask you that, but now we have a question from Tasi Tamang. So Tasi Tamang is he's a conservationist from Mugu, from that
Uh-huh.
area in research. So he asks about the incidence of snow leopard biting, so you got bitten by snow leopard in Longo. Can you tell like a little bit more about that?
Yes, I can. That was the second cat that we recollared, and it was the second or third recapture that we had on it. It was our traps were put right opposite the camp on the other side of the river because that terrace was regularly traveled by snow leopards and marked. And they had to come down a bluff, and it was just before the bluff that I put the trap in the trail. And the cat got caught. All you need to do is move the trap like 5 feet, and it'll get caught. It'll get, it avoids an immediate spot, but not the region. And it got caught, and we had a problem because we had a blowpipe dart gun, and for some reason this cat was really having a difficult time. It had almost no body muscle or anything on it, and I blew the dart right at the flank, and it just bounced off. And we knew it had not injected, but what we didn't know, of course, is how much drug might have got in. So we had to wait a while and see if there were any signs of it becoming anesthetized, which it wasn't. So then I said, well, okay, Gary, it's your chance now. Go in with the jab stick. And he went in, and that time the cat just totally deflected the jab stick to one side. And he said, I'm going to do it. I got to do it. So he went back, and this time he did get it, but we only had literally 10 minutes to work with it because we did not want to overdose that cat. So it had a very, very light dosage. And all I wanted to do was change the collar because the collar was not working. We had earlier that day actually got to it, or the day previous, I guess it was, we got to within about 25, 30 feet of it. It was up on a cliff, and we didn't have a signal. We knew the cat was there because we could see the tracks going up that trail. So it was on the way, moving the cat away from the edge of the bluff up into a bunch of rocks where it could lie and rest and recover, that Gary was wise. He got the tail, I got the head. And it was while climbing over one of the rocks that it was a big rock that the cat's head came to rest on the rock and lolled to the side and clamped right on my right hand. And I jerked it away immediately, but it fortunately bit me between my fingers. But nonetheless, septicemia was a big problem, and this was in winter, late winter. I had to leave immediately, go to Kathmandu to get, doctor's attention. So that
Can you
was that.
can you also can you also mention how long did it take you to get to Kathmandu on the way back?
As I recall, it took about a week. And in part because we did get to Jumla quickly, but there were no daily flights, of course. There were only 2 flights a week. And there was no flight to other sites, it was just one to Kathmandu. So by the time I got to Kathmandu, the surgeon, I actually went to the army surgeon, and he just took one look at my hand and he said, "Are you crazy? I don't sew up dead meat. I can't do anything for you. You can get a rabies shot, which I got, but that was that. And it healed. I still have a slight scar, but no muscular, no nervous ailment or anything.
It's good that things were sorted
So
out in a good
I
way.
was more careful after that, I can tell you.
So I'm going back to the questions again. So we have questions from Nakul Chetri. He
Oh, yeah.
asks about how the human-wildlife conflict is still an issue.
Why is it still an issue? It's
Yeah.
basically an issue because the government has not given it high priority, does not invest the relatively small amount of money that it would take to begin to develop trust with the local communities and start to seek a solution where the community would cover part of the cost of that, of coexisting. So it's a lack of action. That's really what it is, basically. And I don't think any country, maybe Bhutan, maybe, but even there, there's still challenges with human-wildlife conflict everywhere.
And the follow-up question is, how can we address at a scale that covers this range and bring some tangible result as a follow-up to the same questions?
How can we what? What about the range?
How can we how can we how can we address at a scale that covers its range and bring some
Oh,
tangible result?
yeah, I think through partnerships between government and local NGOs and local government, provincial government policies. Uh, I think that's the only way, with some maybe investment from outside in core money, not paying for all the interventions, but more facilitating the development of techniques that the villages can better protect their livestock when it's out on the open range, and can improve their corrals, their livestock pens. I think it's all of that, really.
It's more about improved husbandry and guarding practices.
Yes, and one way to enter that is, they have a lot of livestock that's often overstocked. So there's degradation of the range. There's competition with wild ungulates, blue sheep, and others. And I think one thing we could do is a lot more education. It's better to have a few healthy animals than many animals that are stressed all the time and that, are depleting the range. And you can't blame the local people for following the strategy of maximum numbers. They do that for one simple reason, and that is that there's a severe winter. It's coming more frequently. Used to be every 8 or 9 or 10 years, in which there's so much snow. They're not stocking forage for the winter. No store feeding, so all the animals die of lack of good nutrition or of hypothermia. So we can start by growing fodder, by changing animal husbandry techniques and giving health services to those communities.
I think this is more relevant now. Sibyl asked, what is your view on the IUCN Red List designation currently for snow leopard? Does it impact research?
Well, there's a lot of controversy about it when it was quote unquote downgraded. I think we've always not been aware that snow leopards were probably more abundant than we've given them credit for. And that goes back to 1976, or actually 71, I think it was, when the US government and the CITES started. CITES started, and it had to come up with a list of endangered species. So they started asking biologists, what animals are rare? And they came to snow leopard, and everybody said, well, hell, I don't know. We never see them. They've got to be rare. And so they should be endangered. So they were made endangered without any good data. And we've gone along, and it's only recently that we've had the techniques that, I think show for us to be able to come up with some estimate of how many live in an area. And I think what's very interesting is that the estimates that people have come up now with the new techniques, like camera trapping and some genetics, is that they're not too different from the ones that have been long-standing. So that means several things to me. One is that we have underestimated their status in the past, their resilience, their ability to maintain themselves. Another could be that they are increasing in some countries, maybe not in others. These are all things that need collaboration, and the G-slip's a good option. PAWS is a good option for that.
We have one question from Petria. It's not exactly related to snow leopard. It's about pampas cat. So what
Okay.
advice would you give to the people starting the end? Sorry, it's Indian cat in Chile. We consider it as a small snow leopard.
Well, I think they are already doing a lot of what is needed, and they are working with the communities. They realize that the cats are often killed to have a pelt in the house, for various cultural auspicious reasons. And they're starting to work with them and improving their livelihood. Uh, they're not getting their livestock killed by these small cats, obviously. And so there's a great opportunity, and they followed in many ways. They might almost have predated the um, the model for snow leopards of national countries collaborating. There was an organization set up in which now there's all the countries that have Andean cats or pampas cats are collaborating on their conservation and research. And continue that model, and for donors to invest more in those species for sure.
We have a questions from Deobadar Rana. It's about the low elevation sighting of snow leopard in Nepal and in Bhutan. So what do you think? Is that a possible range? What could be the possibility? Either it's range expansion or other reason.
Um, Yeah, well, I don't know that snow leopards are going to come to the lowlands. That one case that happened in Nepal was obviously in a barren case, and I don't know whether it was an animal that had been captured and released or whether it was an animal that lost its way. Uh, but essentially, snow leopards are going to move to areas, and where they ever encounter people, they're going to become more cautious. So that the presence of people and the high population, I think, is going to be somewhat of a barrier to their movement until at such time that snow leopard densities are so high that they have no option but to, they get pushed down into non-habitat.
So
If
during your
that ever
time,
happens, I doubt it'll ever happen.
so during your time in Longo, what was the lowest elevation you recorded?
Oh, for me, it was about 3,000 meters, 2,900 meters.
Yeah, that's the average range we often see.
Yeah. Yeah. And when we did the slims, the way we did use GIS, and we had to come up with some estimate of how much potential habitat there was. We basically used the contours and starting at 3,000 meters, going up to about 16 and a half, 17. And anywhere in there that had rugged habitat or mountainous habitat, hill habitat, we considered snow leopard range, and that was all mapped. And that's how that number of, what's it, about 1.7 million. It's obviously an overestimate, but that's how we came up with it.
So speaking about the contour, so in those time when you started studying Longo, there was no GPS and there were no, I think, like reliable GIS layers available. So how, can you share about your own experience of navigating yourself in the field in that rugged terrain and digitizing that information that you have collected in the digital map? Can you maybe share
Yeah.
about your experience?
It was a big challenge, and I realized early on that we needed a map. So this is before the days of cameras, even rangefinders didn't exist at that time. Uh, uh, but we did have clinometers and we had compasses, and I managed to get hold of a survey of India map of the Longu region, which is 1 to 63,000, as I remember. And we just blew that up to cover our study area. And we had that available to us with tracing paper. So whenever we had to map the habitat. There were aerial photographs, but they were terrible. And so all our mapping had to be done by climbing up on ridge lines and using our binoculars, using our compasses and our clinometers, estimating the boundaries, the ecotones of, shrubland, forest, barren habitat, etc. So we did all of that, and took a lot of mapping, but it helped us in one way because we were wondering, why did snow leopards always pick a certain type of rock to send spray on? We could predict it. Once we'd seen a few, we would almost know. We could go up to that rock and there would be a scent or there wouldn't be a scent there. And a lot of it had to do with visibility. So we picked a whole sections of random rocks and we categorized the visibility from them at the eye level of a snow leopard, looking across slope, upslope, and downslope. And we found out that rocks that had good across slope and good downslope were more likely to be used than rocks that were hidden from above. And I guess the other thing was that the vegetation type around there was really also quite important. So if the brush was really thick, cats would not go there. And I would assume that's because they didn't want to get surprised by another snow leopard, you know? This is just their way of being solitary and you know, avoiding contact.
Thank you. So we are around the end of the program. So before I switch, I have one last questions with you. What advice would you give to the young conservationists? This is quite you know, like many participants share about this. So what would be one advice that we would like to give to the young people who are or who wants to be in the conservation field?
The first thing I would say is follow your heart, follow your passion. If you're not passionate about it, don't bother, don't get involved, because you will not do it justice at all as a researcher or a conservationist. So you need passion. If you know if it's in something else, go and do that. Then I would say you really need dedication. You got to get into the field. It is so important. Do not sit in front of a computer and try to do computer snow leopard conservation. We just don't need it. You know, it's not helping the local communities. It's not solving our problems. Get in the field, meet the communities, talk to them, and learn from them.
Thank you, Rodney. Thank you so much for this wonderful presentation and this wonderful experience and stories, you know, that inspire generations.
Thank you.
I would like to thank everyone for your time.
Before you go, I just want to say one thing. I don't know how many questions there were that we did not answer. If there are any, I'm happy to try and answer them. Probably record something, but
it's pretty
did we
much
get
done.
most
I
of
would
them?
like to pass on. So I'm going to pass it to the Baira, the executive director of Snow Leopard Network. So Baira will carry on. So
Okay.
Baira, here you go.
Yeah, I think there is a few questions left out, but they can always email to Rodney and to Raki to us, so we could make sure to answer those questions. But it's thank you so much, dear Rodney, to present for our Snow Leopard Network. It's really inspiring. You left all of us very inspired. Your long-standing dedication to conservation and in-depth of the knowledge and experience is really, you shared, was really inspiring. So it is great honor to have you here today with us. Your insights not only, you know, enriched the conservation, but also it reminded us to be committed, specifically highlighting, you know, engaging with the local communities and indigenous people is high priority for our conservation, you know, actions. So it was really, really important, really inspiring webinar. Thank you so much, Rodney, and stay well. So thank you, everyone, for attending today's webinar.
And I'd like to thank Rinzin for hosting this and the SLN and all of you, and keep up the good work. And I hope to see some of you as I retire and travel a little bit.
Yes. See you soon. Thank you, Rinzin, for facilitating webinar.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. Thank you, everyone, for your time.